How's it going, everybody? Happy Tuesday and welcome back into the SFS channel. If you're watching today's episode, that likely means you still have 1 week of fantasy football left to go here. The majority of us, I would say, finished our seasons off this past week in week 17. Personally, I don't have any leagues still going here for week 18. I wrapped all those up this past week. But there's still a large number of people out there who have 1 week to go here. And this is what it all comes down to, week 18 fantasy action. So I'm going 1 more week here. We're putting out more advice through week 18 to get you guys set up and ready to go for those games. I will publish rankings on my website, sizzlefantasy.com, to make sure you guys have everything and are set to go for those week 18 matchups if that's the case for you all this week. So today we're talking 10 must-add players. These are guys I think can contribute for this season finale matchup and hopefully bring you guys the opportunity to win a league championship. So with that being said, drop down, give today's episode a like, and click that subscribe button if you're new around here. But with that being said, I'm not going to waste any more time. Let's hit the intro and let's get started. All right, we're going to be kicking off today's episode with my priority ad for Week 18 and also at the same time the most rostered player on today's list. So the availability for Rashaad Penny is going to be lower than anyone else on the list for today's episode, but I also believe he is the most important player to have on your roster and potentially in your lineup. So this past week, if you played Rashaad Penny, hats off to you. You probably won your week. It's not a guarantee, but the numbers he put up were astronomical. They were excellent. And he has really been showing us since week 14 just how dominant he can be. He's been, I've talked about this the past couple of weeks as well, pretty much a draft bust for Seattle, taking him out of San Diego State in the first round a few years ago in the NFL draft. He's been very banged up, very injured. They have not gotten the usage out of him that they would like to. But 3 of the past 4 weeks here, he has been on an absolute tear. Rashaad Penny had his third 135-plus rushing yard performance since Week 14 this past week in Week 17 against the Detroit Lions, and it was quite the performance. 25 rushing attempts, $170 on the ground, 2 touchdowns, and he tacked on 2 receptions for 15 yards as well. So you've got some real dynamic value here, and you've got a player with some explosive ability, as I said. This is a player who is being utilized as a workhorse running back. He had one little blip in that stretch of games where DJ Dallas was seeing a respectable amount of touches as well. But since that game, we've got back-to-back performances with Rashaad Penny putting up really great numbers. I feel kind of bad. Last week, we had a lot of questions about Rashaad Penny or Damian Harris, for example, or Elijah Mitchell and some other scenarios out there. And largely, I directed people towards starting those other options, which ended up producing fairly respectable points as well. But this week was just, the matchups were there for those other players, and hopefully it didn't come down to you not starting Rashaad Penny. I obviously, like I said, directed players towards starting other options. Despite the fact that Rashaad Penny made my must-start list last week, I just felt that other teams had better options out there. The good news, though, is that hopefully, since you were choosing between starting Rashaad Penny or other players, if you didn't start him, he was on your bench. So thankfully, you weren't playing against him in your fantasy championships. Unless you needed some sort of Jamar Chase equalizer in your lineups, hopefully things worked out just fine. Damian Harris ended up scoring 2 touchdowns. Other guys out there had some various situations as well. So Rashaad Penny, a big-time ad for those playing Week 18 championship games. He's at Arizona this week in Week 18, so that's something to keep an eye on as well. Boston Scott, my next must-add player here, rostered in 24% of fantasy leagues. He's got a Week 18 matchup with the Dallas Cowboys, so not the best matchup in the world. That defense is still playing hot. Last week, Kyler Murray got the best of him, and he was able to upset Dallas at AT&T Stadium. But Boston Scott here, a very impressive workload, 18 touches, 86 yards from scrimmage, and 2 rushing touchdowns. Now, this was an interesting situation where 2 weeks in a row now we've seen the goal line touches bounce Boston Scott's way in favor of Jordan Howard, at least the ones that have cashed in for 6 points. Jordan Howard was doing some dirty work, getting the team down in that area, able to score from just a couple yards out, and then Boston Scott was able to punch those balls in for 6. But those are the touches that count. Those are the ones that are worth 6 points each. And ultimately, Boston Scott was able to deliver on those earlier on in the season when Boston Scott and Jordan Howard were kind of taking a 1-2 punch approach to filling in the absence of Miles Sanders. It was Jordan Howard who was getting those touches. So the second time around here, we're seeing Boston Scott get more opportunity, 21 points this week in half PPR scoring. Just a week ago in Week 16, when mid-game, Boston Scott was asked to relieve Miles Sanders, who broke his hand. He had 12 rushing attempts, 41 yards, and a rushing touchdown. So you've got 3 rushing touchdowns in the last 2 weeks. That's a fairly impressive marker for a running back coming off the bench. We've seen Boston Scott in this reserve role for Philadelphia dating back to last season and even beyond that point. This is a talented player and someone who can fill in, catch passes, and give you some sort of a dynamic level presence in fantasy lineups. So I like Boston Scott this week. Again, the matchup isn't fantastic, but it's the starting role of the running back for the Philadelphia Eagles in the number 1 rushing offense in the league. Now, part of that comes down to Jalen Hurts also being a force on the ground as well, but this is still a situation where you can find a valuable add on the waivers this week. Tevin Coleman, another option that could potentially be a team starting level running back this week. Michael Carter suffered a concussion mid-game this past week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Ty Johnson, who's still in the lineup, he's still healthy, should be a factor there. He's going to be more factored in as the receiving back. Now, Tevin Coleman wasn't on the field this week. He was out in COVID-19 protocols. But this week, he should be available and an option for this Jets team. Like I said, expect Ty Johnson to absorb the majority of the receiving level involvement, whereas Tevin Coleman should be more of a factor on the ground. So definitely a better play in standard leagues, not someone with super high upside, especially given the circumstances of the offense he's playing for, but also in the sense that you're not going to be getting those receiving volume plays on top of that. But this should be the player who gets those goal line carries for this Jets offense. Ogunbowale here for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Another player who's not in the best offense. There's a lot of empty volume, you would say, for a player like Dare Ogunbowale for this Jacksonville offense. This is a player that is the lead back for this offense with James Robinson out right now. Obviously, he had that season-ending injury a week ago, and Ogunbowale had to step in that matchup. His first week in here, he didn't really do much with his touches. Now, the Jags got absolutely shell-shocked and blown off the field by the Pats. However, he was able to catch a receiving touchdown from 20-plus yards out from Trevor Lawrence. That ultimately saved his fantasy week. Again, outside of that, though, he is the lead running back, but we have to take that with a grain of salt because the production isn't all that fantastic on a play-by-play basis. He's not getting super efficient touches. You're relying on a level of touchdown dependency to get you the level of output you're looking for. So if he gets that touchdown, you're looking at someone who could be a lower-end flex play, but if that's not the case, you're looking at a situation that's a little bit less favorable, and you almost might be adding this player to block an opponent from adding a potential starting level lineup piece. So, again, empty touches. He's a guy that'll get you volume, but he's not going to give you a super high level of efficiency or productivity with those touches. You're looking for those TDs to bounce Ogunbowale's way. Rex Burkhead, still a player who's widely available on the waiver wire. 32.1% of leagues is the only share that he is rostered in there. So over 2/3 of leagues have the option to add Rex Burkhead. I think he's at least worth a bench roster spot at this point. Now, the Texans offense isn't something that you expect to be incredibly explosive or dynamic on a week-to-week basis. He does have Tennessee, which has been a stingier opponent on the ground in Week 18 here for the final game of this regular season. But since Davis Mills has stepped in here, the Texans have had some level of salvageability in the running game, and they've also had some level of effectiveness in the passing game as well. They're not, again, an over-the-top explosive team. Brandon Cooks is about the only player on this offense who's capable of doing that, and Rex Burkhead is someone who widely, and for the most part, I'm guilty of this, have dismissed as one of those empty touch players who gets a lot of volume but isn't overly efficient with them. And then in the semifinal round for most leagues, it would be the opening round of the fantasy playoffs for those of you still playing this week. He comes out and has dang near 150 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns against the Los Angeles Chargers. So he has shown us that he can do enough work when he's given a favorable situation. That Chargers matchup was a fantastic matchup on the ground for a player like Rex Burkhead. He capitalized, punched that ball in for 6, and he's been getting a lot of touches and a lot of volume since he's kind of surpassed the other players in this Texans offense as the true lead back week after week. So it was his 4th straight 15-plus touch game in Week 17 against the San Francisco 49ers. Again, he wasn't overly efficient or productive in that game, and that wasn't a matchup I expected him to do all that well in, but he still outproduced my expectations because I thought that the 49ers front would stymie the run game and stymie him as a player, but his involvement as a receiver, he caught 6 passes, really kept him afloat and enabled him to have a respectable outing in PPR formats. So he is relatively touchdown dependent, as I said, someone who has a level of empty volume associated with him because this Texans offense isn't going to be sustaining long drives. They aren't a team that's going to hang a bunch of points on the board. They only scored 7 points, I believe, in a 23-7 loss to the 49ers this past week. So he'll get out there, he'll get his touches, but you're hoping for a touchdown. You're hoping for him to spring a big play and open up the opportunity to have some level of chunk yardage to get you some quick and easy points. But at the end of the day, he does have 15 receptions in his last 4 games. That's giving him some level of added bonus that we might not see from even a Tevin Coleman, who is probably going to be widely used as a pure rusher, who also makes, and obviously we already covered on the list for today's video. Bouncing in the direction of a wide receiver now, Rashod Bateman of the Baltimore Ravens is someone that I think is having a quietly nice end to this fantasy season. Last week he picked up 10 targets, which is his career and season high for the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously, Tyler Huntley was the quarterback. Lamar Jackson was out yet another week here. So that's an important thing to notice here. And put that into context is that depending on who the quarterback is for the Ravens next week, that can impact how much usage and opportunity Bateman has. Because when I went back and looked at the numbers here, I actually noticed that Bateman's second highest career target total and second highest reception total came back in week 14, which is when Lamar Jackson sustained that ankle injury and when Tyler Huntley first entered the game. And Bateman had a large hand in that comeback the Ravens made late in the game. So 7 receptions in each of those contests. It was actually the second highest target outing, rather, for Bateman back in week 14. He caught 7 of his 8 balls with Huntley under center. So clearly Tyler Huntley likes to throw Rashaad Bateman the football. That's the point I'm trying to make here. So if Lamar comes back, it's not that Rashaad Bateman is no longer worth a roster spot. However, it might mean that his target share goes down slightly because, again, Huntley has been favoring him. But 7 catches, 58 yards, no receiving touchdowns here in week 16 against the Rams. They barely lost that contest. It looked like for a while they were going to be able to pull that one off, but not the case. Bateman, though, a talented rookie player. I've raved about him all season long. I love the talent he possesses, and looking forward into next season as his role expands here as a Baltimore Raven. I'm really excited about that. But again, there is the potential here for him to do some damage in a matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers here in week 18 to go over the top and do some damage to that secondary. Trey Lance moving into the quarterback position now. He has the Rams on the road here in week 18. No guarantees that Trey Lance is the starter for San Francisco, as obviously he was filling in for Jimmy Garoppolo here in week 17. But he showed me enough to be relatively confident in him as a dual threat quarterback. Now, he wasn't overly explosive. He wasn't overly productive as a rusher. He did tuck it and run 8 times for 31 yards, however. So you're really only getting a bonus 3 points on the ground for the work that he did there. However, he did improve since his last start as a 49er, also filling in for Jimmy G, who was injured. He did have 249 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. So this is a player with a really big arm. You've got explosive weapons in the passing game. George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk. He has the surrounding players to give him the opportunity to have big-time potential. He's a young quarterback, still very raw, has a lot of development that needs to be done for San Francisco before I think he can take this team to where they think he ultimately can. And I believe in his talent long-term. In a 1-week window here, you're looking at the Rams. This is a defense that has been relatively underwhelming since acquiring big names like Von Miller midseason via trade. I think Trey has an opportunity to succeed. So he would be a lower-end QB1 for me, maybe a higher-end QB2. I have yet to do my Week 18 rankings. But if you're looking to snatch up a respectable number 2 quarterback who could potentially get a start this week, Trey Lance is a player to look to, again, because Jimmy Garoppolo's availability is still relatively uncertain. Braxton Berrios for the New York Jets. How about this guy? He's not necessarily your franchise game-changing wide receiver, but this guy's just a playmaker, and he's gone out the last couple of weeks and made plays for the Jets, helped keep them in football games. And ultimately, that's shown up in the fantasy column with some point production. So Braxton Berrios back in Week 16 actually had a 100-yard kick return touchdown against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Depending on how your league scores, that potentially might have been worth a touchdown for you. In a lot of the leagues I play in, if you happen to have a kick return or punt return touchdown, you get points and you're credited for that. So I was actually going up against someone in a multi-flex league who went out and started Braxton Berrios against me in the fantasy playoffs. A ballsy move on their part. It paid off, and he got that kick return touchdown. I ended up pulling out that win. But it certainly made me uncomfortable. I was against Rex Burkhead in that 149-yard, 2-touchdown performance in that matchup. And then Braxton Berrios as a flex option, which is something he's become very viable with here. And moving into Week 17, he one-upped himself. Now a 100-yard kick return touchdown is probably more of an impressive feat than even Braxton Berrios' stat line for this past week against Tampa Bay. But what he's showing you is that when he gets the opportunity in this offense, he can make plays. And you go back to the last couple of seasons, he shows up and makes flashes in spurts. And like I said, this isn't necessarily your franchise weekly starting wide receiver. But when you look at the injuries that this Jets offense has suffered, Elijah Moore was out this week. Jamison Crowder was out this week. Obviously, Corey Davis has been lost for the season. He's going to get the chance to play and be in the lineup again here this week. And when he's been given opportunities, again, he just makes plays. Had 12 targets, a very impressive marker for him here this past week. 8 receptions, 65 yards, and a touchdown against Tom Brady's Buccaneers. The Jets weren't able to quite hold on to that one for 4 quarters, but they made it a game. Zach Wilson is starting to show positive signs. All very encouraging if you are a fan of the Jets or need a flex option in a PPR league this week. How about Allen Lazard of my Green Bay Packers? Absolutely love what he's been doing. He's not the flashiest player in the world. He's not the most explosive guy downfield. But again, like a Braxton Berrios, he is just a playmaker. Aaron Rodgers trusts Allen Lazard with basically everything he's got. In a big moment, he's not afraid to let it rip to number 13. However, there is multiple reasons that I am interested in Mr. Lazard here for Week 18 as a potential 1-week snatch in play in a flex level position. Only rostered in 17.5% of leagues, so you got a wide level of availability here. Caught all 6 of his 6 targets, 100% catch percentage here in Week 17 against the Minnesota Vikings, heading to Detroit now in Week 18. So not only do you have a level of trust and accountability between Allen Lazard and Aaron Rodgers, I would say and argue that the long debated number 2 wide receiver role in this Green Bay offense it's over. When Allen Lazard is on the field, he is the number 2 option. Now, things get a little bit more dicey and confusing when Randall Cobb's in the lineup, but right now he is still working towards a rather fast recovery from core muscle surgery. Nonetheless, though, Allen Lazard is the number 2 for me right now in this Packers offense, and at least in the bubble of Week 18, this is the player I'd be looking to add at this position for this offense because Green Bay has locked up the number 1 seed. They are the team that's going to get the bye week heading into the NFL playoffs. They've already secured that. A Dallas loss and a Green Bay win on Sunday Night Football ensured that. And you've got the chance that Green Bay could rest Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams or just Aaron Rodgers, whatever the case might be. You might not see 12 or 17 out there on the field this week. And that would promote Allen Lazard to the number 1 wide receiver role in this offense with Jordan Love under center, who is probably going to look for the most dependable option in this offense, and that would be Allen Lazard, the guy that does the dirty work for this team. You've got other playmakers, other talented guys like a Marquez Valdes-Scantling, but he can really only do one thing, and that's run deep down the field in either a fade or a post pattern. And if he's not wide open and runs right past his defender, he's probably not going to make a play for you. So if Aaron Rodgers is not out there on the field, I'm assuming they're also going to sit Devontae Adams. Those are 2 of the most integral parts of this team. And obviously this offense, they want them healthy going into the postseason. And obviously with the opportunity for returning starters like a David Bakhtiari, Zadarius Smith, Jair Alexander, you're going to want to keep and make sure as many of your superstar playmakers are healthy and on the field as possible. So Lazard could be in for an elevated and even larger role here in Week 18. There's a chance that both Aaron and Devontae do play. If that's the case, I still think he's worth an add because obviously Rodgers has shown dependability and trust in Lazard here. He does have 3 touchdowns in his last 4 games, and like I said, the availability of 12 and 17 is going to be a big deal here. And then finally, Jakobi Meyers. Now, he is owned widely in just under 60% of leagues, but this is a player who's very quietly in PPR leagues been making a difference. And if you need a flex option, if you need someone that's going to get target volume and be a very sure-handed pass catcher and just give you a safe floor, there's not too much ceiling associated with Jakobi Meyers here with this last spot on the must-add list this week. But again, in PPR leagues, this is a player I do trust as a lower-end flex option they can just go out there and get the job done. He's got 4 straight 8+ target games. It's a very impressive marker. That's good volume for a player that we don't really think of as an elite level fantasy asset. And then you look at Mac Jones, and this has really developed into Jones's safety valve. They don't really have in New England right now that James White player in the backfield that is an uber dependable passing option out there that'll just rack up a bunch of receptions. That's kind of developed into Jakobi Meyers as a guy who will just sit down in the middle of the zone coverage and catch a 5 to 8 yard route and sit down. And that's what he's done. He caught 73 yards worth of receiving volume last week on 8 receptions rather. Caught all 8 of his targets. So again, 100% catch percentage. That's something that's very impressive to see, and you don't see all that often for a team's #1 receiver. So you're getting great floor value here. He's at Miami in week 18. He saw 9 targets against them back in week 1. So again, you've been getting that volume all season long. Not someone that's going to score too many touchdowns. He's only got 2 of them on the season, and I believe those are his only 2 career touchdowns because he's been someone that's been in the league for a little bit now, but just couldn't seem to find the end zone, whether it was bad luck with penalties or not just getting targeted down there. It's been an interesting road for Myers, but I look at him as the #1 option in this offense. Again, he has developed into Mac Jones' safety valve, and if you're looking for someone in PPR leagues to start for you in that flex position, maybe you've got multiple flex spots in your lineups, have to start 3 wide receivers in a flex, whatever that case might be, I think that there is some lineup value to be had in leagues where he's out there for you to add. Alrighty, those are my 10 must-add players for Week 18 fantasy action. Again, we will be posting lineup advice, must-start players for this week's fantasy content or our fantasy action. I know that some of you guys are still playing out there, so I want to make sure that I get you guys the advice and the information you need. If you're looking to go a little bit deeper, get some more interaction with other members of the community, go check out the community Discord. That is linked in the description of today's episode. It's free to join. You can interact with others out there. And whenever I've got time, I'm out there surfing through that stuff and answering questions and comments in there. So obviously, leave your comments down in the comment section below. I'll get back to as many of those as possible as well. And I will see you guys later on in the week for the Fantasy Football Awards for 2021. We'll be doing some other fun videos reflecting on this season. And then obviously, again, making sure those of you who have championships here in Week 18 are covered with your advice. So thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.